Hello, can you hear me?
Hi,
Okay,
I
lovely.
can.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Cambridge Union on a slightly cold October Monday night. We are joined this evening by Jameela Jamil, an actor, model, radio presenter, activist, and peerless conversationalist. And Jameela Jamil joins us now. So if you could join me in welcoming her.
Hi, hello. I can't really hear you for shit. I can
You can't hear
barely
me.
make out what you're saying.
Shall I speak up a bit?
Oh, this is better. This is better.
This is better.
Yeah,
Are we
that's
good?
Hi, yeah.
Lovely. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm homesick for London because this country is on fire, both emotionally and literally. So,
Right. Well, let's try and think about the flames a bit later. To start on a slightly lighter note, I've been binge watching The Good Place recently, and I was just wondering, do you think you're headed for the good place or the bad place?
oh, definitely the bad place. I'm in show business. What an asshole! Like, I think anyone in this rotten, bizarre business is going straight to hell. I think we know that when we enter it.
You were talking to me just upstairs a bit about our generation's obsession with
Yeah.
perfection and how celebrities aren't allowed to make mistakes. I'm just wondering about whether or not you think we're sort of headed in a good direction with that, on that, or if you think we're getting
Yeah,
worse.
it wasn't really about celebrities. That's not what I meant. I meant we kind of hold ourselves and each other to this standard, and that
Right.
I'm just one example of whenever I make a mistake and say, "Oh, sorry, I fucked up. Actually, this is the right way to do this, and I didn't know that, and now I do." I think that the vitriol with which that is met, it's almost worse than if I pretended to not give a fuck. If I didn't try, that would be less grief for me. But also, if I just didn't respond and didn't apologize and I didn't like show my workings out as to how I've improved, I would receive less vitriol. And I'm not worried about myself. I'm worried about what kids who are on the internet who are seeing this are processing. Are they thinking that, okay, well, if you make a mistake, you should never admit to your mistake, or you should never even try in case you fail? I think we have such a toxic relationship with failure and rejection in this generation, where we think that upon your first error, or even your 10th error, if it wasn't intentionally harmful, you should be cast out of society. I think it's really dangerous because I find failure to be, I've said this before, but I find it to be more heroic because success isn't guaranteed. And I think our generation, if we stand a chance of surviving this ridiculous world psychologically, we need to make more space for error. We need to make more space for growth. Otherwise, if we don't believe in human growth, then what is the point of activism? What is the point in speakers and analysts and all these different people who are trying to make the world a better place if we don't fundamentally believe in change? No one's coming out perfect. No one understands every single different experience around the world just by themselves. And so we need to encourage people just to try. And trying means you're going to come across failure. You're going to stumble. And the magic and the growth happens in getting back up, dusting yourself off and trying again.
I want to turn to those kids who are growing up. You've spoken recently about how there was a lack of representation of South Asian women in particular when you were growing up. And I wondered how you saw the picture today. Is the problem more acute, and what can be done to improve representation?
No, I'd say it's better than when I was growing up. The only time we would ever be represented was a white person wearing brown face and putting on a very silly accent. And so, and we were never the love of someone's life. We were never the hero. We were never the protagonist. We were always the sort of comic relief punching bag. And so now at least you've got like Kumail in Marvel, and you have me in The Good Place playing someone who is a Pakistani person, but who isn't defined by my Pakistani-ness, who isn't, I'm not designed to play any kind of stereotypes around my culture. We have, Priyanka and Mindy, who's just this incredible showrunner. So I think things are better. We just need to keep moving in the right direction because, I've personally seen the harm of not being represented. When I was younger, it made me hate where I was from, and then, growing up seeing no one South Asian, and then the only South Asians I did see as a teenager were all playing fucking terrorists. So that harmed my own connection to where I was from and made me just desperately wish I was either white or black, anything but what I was. And so it is a massive honor to get the opportunity to be that person for a little South Asian kid. I'm in like the first ever all Asian Disney program. It's called Mira Royal Detective, an entire Indian cast. It's all set in India, authentic music, authentic food and colors. It's really beautiful and glorifying of India, because normally we only hear about the poverty or the, you know, the crisis over there politically. And so it feels so incredible to be a part of that shift.
And I'm just wondering how this lack of representation growing up affects one's sense of self. Does it make you sort of want to assimilate and reject your heritage? And has that sort of change when you're able to return to your roots affected you recently?
Yeah, massively. I mean, I just sort of shunned my entire culture. I didn't want the body type. I didn't want the skin color. I didn't, I didn't want the language, the music, and so I missed out. I didn't even eat the food, for Christ's sake, when I was younger. And now I love that food, and I love the music, and I love the culture. And I missed out on so much of what is so rich about India and about Pakistan and just around the entire region. And I feel so sad for that, because I definitely missed out, because what a wonderful opportunity to learn about something that isn't in the mainstream. And I just shunned it deliberately because I was told via erasure or via like literal and abhorrent ridicule that it was bad. And I grew up in the 90s in England, and which is probably when you were born, but like it was the most racist moment towards, it was the beginning of this very long running racist moment towards those who people perceived to be Muslims.
And how does that then relate to one's sense of British identity? I mean, you're obviously a proud Londoner, but I'm just wondering if these series of traumatic experiences growing up have ever made you question your place within Britain.
I love London, but I definitely feel like I've had my heart broken by it a few times. It's afforded me so many extraordinary opportunities, but I definitely feel as though there are so many areas in which we need to improve. I think we've seen with Brexit, it's an obvious statement that we still suffer from rampant xenophobia across the UK, but also there is so much misogyny, so much patriarchy, not just in my industry, but throughout the industries. There is so much ableism. We still don't change like listed buildings to be accessible for all people. There are just many things that, we could be so great. We have all of the opportunities in order to be so evolved and accessible and excellent and such leaders. And we are so constricted by our dedication to the past and to the way things have always been done that we're falling behind. And, we're seeing that every step of the way. So I think that my heart breaks for London, but I'll always love it, but I will always want it to do better. So I'll just keep holding it to account.
And obviously moving to America, you encounter a different set of, related but prejudices that are expressed in different ways. How would you contrast that with your experiences in London and in the UK more generally?
I mean, look, they both got their own faults. The one thing I would say I noticed that was a positive over in America is that they do seem to be more dedicated to representation and to empowering women to be allowed to, really have exciting and interesting, diverse work after the age of 30 and into 40s and 50s and 60s. They are definitely more open to people of different sizes and shapes, and they are less ableist. They are not entirely unableist, but they are less ableist. And so I think that I do think that they are advanced in those certain ways. But obviously, if anyone's read the news, you can see that there are still many flaws over here.
And talking about body image, I wondered if you could talk us through the background behind the I Weigh campaign and what in particular led you to embark on it.
I didn't want to be in TV. I very classically wanted to be a doctor when I was younger, and then I became a teacher. So I didn't plan on this. And when I got given the opportunity to replace Alexa Chung, I just said to the woman who was going to sign me as an agent, I just said, well, I don't really have an interest in being famous, but I would like to help people. And I always wanted to help raise awareness around eating disorders because I had such a severe eating disorder from when I was a child throughout my teens. And I struggled tremendously with my health because of it, and have done so for the rest of my life. And so I've always been vocal around eating disorder culture and fat phobia and the horrifying ways in which we teach women that they are supposed to look and that their worth is defined by their aesthetic and numbers on a scale. And IWay happened in 2018 after about 13 years of activism. But now I was on a hit TV show around the world, so obviously it was going to get more attention. I just saw a picture of the Kardashians, a group of, whatever I or anyone else might think of them, they are a very impressive group of women who've done something unprecedented historically, and they have made a giant empire. And the numbers written across their bodies in this group shot were not how many awards they have won or what they have achieved or how much money even they are worth, but it was how much they weigh. And I just thought, God, you would never find a picture of 6 businessmen or 6 famous actors or any men who aren't UFC fighters with their weight written across their bodies. This is still 20 years after I developed an eating disorder, how we measure a woman's worth. And we have taught women to measure their own worth, which is the worst tragedy. So I got mouthy about it on Twitter, which I have been known to do with mixed results. And it went viral, and it sort of stayed viral for the last 2 years. Because the world is fed up of being just consistently shoved into so many narrow boxes.
I'm just thinking about the patriarchy more widely. You've spoken in recent interviews about traumatic personal encounters with the patriarchy that you experienced growing up. What advice would you offer to young women who may be going through exactly the same experiences that you encountered in the 90s?
I think learning our history is incredibly helpful. Understanding the patterns of patriarchy helps you detect it when it's happening to you or when you are encountering it. I think it's very important to make sure that you aren't gaslighting yourself around patriarchy. I honestly think it all starts with us. We have so much internalized misogyny and patriarchy within us because we've been learning it since the first time we turned on a TV at the age of 2 and saw a princess and, was seeing the narrative of what a woman's life is supposed to be. So undoing it in yourself is the first really empowering step, because then you are less likely to catch it elsewhere. It kind of gives you, you develop an immunity. So listening to that inner bully in your head, asking yourself if you would ever tolerate those things being said to a woman that you respect, why are you then allowed to say those things to yourself? I think the sturdiness has to come from within before it can be presented outside. So that is my advice, is honestly just understanding it myself, no longer gaslighting myself, educating myself, and starting to actually access the rage that I was entitled to feel all along, and then wielding it for power and learning the tremendous joy of the word no. It's my favorite word after fuck.
Changing track slightly.
Sorry.
No,
this is why I didn't go to Cambridge. Yeah, go on.
We'll have you over some point when travel restrictions ease up a little. Changing track slightly, how have you found lockdown? It's been crap for most of us, but how have you coped? Do you have any advice? We could really use some. We're all...
I think, look, we're all different and we're all living in different scenarios. But what I will say is that I have definitely not ingested this messaging that we're supposed to come out of lockdown with fucking 6-pack and with 7 new skills and I don't know, and coming out of this again, like as more perfect and improved human beings. We're in a global catastrophe and a crisis. We're entering a depression, and it's okay to just survive. And honestly, surviving in itself is just an achievement. So I've definitely given myself a free pass to just fall apart and allow like what's coming in from the outside to just process the way it's supposed to process. I'm taking my stress out on pizza and donuts, and that feels good to me. So I'm sure as shit not coming out of this with a 6-pack. I would say that also, if you are someone who is lucky enough to not be a frontline essential worker and you have a lot of time at home, a lot of nothing to do, a lot of stillness, there are going to be certain feelings that you've maybe been able to neglect up until now because life has been so busy and chaotic. In this stillness, maybe those feelings are surfacing. I would urge you to not push them away and instead use this opportunity of stillness and time to lean into them and maybe start processing old trauma or damage that might be popping up. That's what I've been doing.
Should we throw this open to the audience for some questions at this point? If you do
Sure.
have a question,
God help me.
please raise your hand. Yes, the person in the second row from the end over there.
Hi.
I'm sorry. I want this to be like as humanly realistic as possible. Basically, I was just wondering, you was talking about like the lack of representation of South Asian women in the media. But having said that, was there anyone, male or female, or like not necessarily South Asian, who you grew up with that did inspire you? I'm just like wondering because I'm of like mixed race Asian identity, but then even so that's complicated by the fact that my mum's of like indigenous Mongolian descent, so like there's not a lot of, even though there's like much more Asian representation on screen, there's not much like indigenous representation anywhere really. So I was just kind of curious about how you might have overcome that and what you did.
Honestly, it was black women. So, you know, Queen Latifah, especially Whoopi Goldberg, oh my God, she was my absolute icon and hero. She was everything that I could have wished for in a role model when I was growing up. So she was a big person for me. Eddie Murphy as well was a big person, was someone that I love. I haven't yet seen his raw and delirious stand-up sets, which... let's leave that there. But I definitely, it was the only people of color that I could see were black people, and I resonated so much with their culture. But also there was, for me, you know, it was a lot of comedy, but sadly a lot of comedy, other than with Whoopi, really was instigated by, or, you know, was dominated by men. And so I guess like Hugh Grant and Richard Curtis and Rowan Atkinson, but it was all mostly in the vein of comedy.
Cool. Yes. If that.
So I wanted to ask you about kind of the pattern in coverage in the media of female celebrities and the kind of short period, maybe like a free trial, if you like, of tolerance that the media has for female celebrities, and how kind of they're attainable yet relatable for this short period of time, and then it seems that there's a shift and, you know, they're completely vilified. Do you feel like you've experienced that, and kind of what do you think about it, basically?
Yeah, I have. It was so helpful that by the time I took off in America, I'd already been in this industry for like 11 years or 10 years, because I had seen the pattern so many times of what we have done forever, which is build her up, deify her, turn her into a saint that she has not professed to be, set her up for expectations that no one could possibly meet, pop her on a pedestal that she did not herself climb onto. And it's so high that when you throw her off, it is so dramatic and kind of delicious to watch, because our society has always loved the tale of the fallen, disgraced woman. It goes all the way back to Eden. You know, we have Eve, the vilified Eve, who disrupts Adam's life. And, you know, then you see what happens with the witch trials, and then you see what's happened throughout the whole of Hollywood. We have a kind of 1 to 2 year life cycle for a woman standing out, whether she's trying to or not. She might just be incredibly successful, or the girl of the moment. She might be winning an Academy Award like poor old Anne Hathaway, one of the first and stupidest cancellations we've ever seen. And so it is a very specific system, and it goes kind of build up, hyperbolize how excellent she is to the point where people start to think that she herself thinks she is that excellent. After you hyperbolize, you start to overexpose her. So you start putting her out everywhere to the point where it looks like she's desperately attention seeking, even though she's not giving you interviews. You are just either making stuff up from a source, or you are pulling from other things that she's done and turning it into a presumed interview. So people start to become sick of her face. That means she's then primed for no one to step in and intervene when they start to destroy her, because everyone's so done with her, they're ready for her to leave, and they want to see her taken down a peg because they assume she thinks that she's important. So then comes the takedown with the smear campaigns and the lies and the twisting of everything she says, and headlines that are so out of context and out of control, and they know that no one's going to read the article, and they do everything for clickbait. And then comes her demise, and then they move on to the next. And it's a system that we didn't recognize before, because there used to be less female celebrities and there used to be less outspoken female celebrities. And so, you know, we saw it kind of happen with Marilyn Monroe and then Diana, and it felt more kind of sporadic. And now, especially post Me Too, with more women getting up and being themselves and being honest and putting themselves out there. And with the rise of feminism within media, we have seen it happen so many more times, so often, that now the pattern cannot be refuted. And so I've definitely been through it, and I knew it was coming. As soon as someone said, I think it was like Time magazine or someone said that I was like one of the most influential people on the internet, and someone else said that I was the feminist hero we need, I knew I was fucked. I was so scared and depressed because I had not referred to myself as that. I've always called myself a feminist in progress. I've never professed to be this great intellectual. I left school at 16. I knew what was happening. And so when the tsunami of shit hit me in February, where they were saying I had Munchausen and they were making fun of my disabled family members and making fun of my mental health and making fun of my sexuality, and then saying I had anything to do with Caroline Flack's death, which I had nothing to do with, when the kind of Piers Morgan led just wave against me happened, I was somewhat ready for it in a way that perhaps someone else wouldn't be, because I'd been studying this cycle for so long. And it was really extraordinary to be in the middle of it, because you're just, you're doing interviews with women journalists who you presume might be on your side and won't try to misrepresent you, who understand your intentions and see that you are literally doing good. Like, I'm speaking in Congress, I'm changing global policy, I'm actually making progress for our generation. And I would have female journalists twist all of my words, take me as far out of context, try to make me sound like such an arsehole and so ignorant and so callous, when I'm so careful and thoughtful when I speak to journalists. And seeing these infuriating headlines, I'm not surprised the internet despises me. I would despise me if I read that version of myself in which I have been perceived. I sound like a complete twat. And so, but I also understand that the patriarchy-led media is not going to allow a woman to be empowered for long, because that will inspire other women to then go forward and be powerful and step into their own power. And that is their biggest fear. The media is it runs on advertising, and it predominantly advertises women's products. Women make up 80% of the market, so therefore we are the ones most targeted, and often they use tactics to make us feel bad about ourselves in order to sell us products to fix what they have convinced us is broken. And so they rely on us feeling like shit about ourselves. Now, someone like me coming out and debunking the diet and detox industry and calling out the fact that it is wrong to criticize stretch marks and cellulite, I threaten billions and billions worth of advertising dollars and pounds. And so they're going to try and continue to make an example out of me by humiliating me relentlessly until I finally disappear. But what they don't realize is I have no shame, and I'm not going anywhere, and they're all just going to have to tolerate me, or kill me. I guess.
We'll go over there. Yep.
Did I answer that? Sorry, it was such a long answer, but I have so much to say on that matter.
Hello, my name's Sharina. Thank you so much, Jameela, for your podcast and your activism over the years.
Thanks.
You actually inspired me to start a podcast during lockdown called Startup Start Now. So selfishly,
Great.
I'm going to ask you some advice on podcasting.
Oh, shit, okay.
And just how, obviously getting your guests and asking your questions unapologetically. And then my second question is, as a young feminist, how do we continue to keep sort of banging the drum and getting the message across, and what can we do within our communities?
Okay, so first things first, when it comes to a podcast, I just make sure that I'm jumping in with the guests. So I will never expect them to just like singularly reveal their most personal secrets. I make sure that they feel comfortable and understand that I will jump in and be vulnerable with them. I think in that moment you can kind of build a sense of community, even if there's just two of you, and therefore it makes them feel safer to be able to really go there emotionally, which is something that's very hard to do, especially when you interview people who are as famous as some of the people that I interview. And so I think it's just very important to be thoughtful, to really be pre-planned. I do pre-interviews for all of my podcasts, which no one else does, but I do a kind of 5-minute pre-interview just to make sure I understand someone's boundaries or the things that they haven't ever been asked before, so that I know where their interests lie. And that has somehow kind of built its way into this feeling like a kind of, I always get what I set out for in each podcast episode. So I think just being as humane and vulnerable as you can will encourage that in them. When it comes to women, I think the most vital thing we need to do is stop turning on each other This is not to say we can't criticize each other. I think criticizing women is imperative to our evolution. But I would say that it's important for us to not buy into tabloid culture, to not buy into gossip and rumors. I think it's really important for us to understand that we have been taught that there's only space for one in the room. That is not true. They say that because they don't want there to be multiple of us, because they don't want us to understand that there is such safety in numbers. So I think calling in other women, investigating our own toxic misogyny, undoing that, and making sure that we kind of create a giant wall. Look at what happened with Me Too, where you took all these women who previously had been against each other, and it's such a bitchy and like isolating industry. Suddenly everyone came together, shared their experiences, no longer felt gaslit and alone, and we managed to change a generational conversation around sexual harassment and abuse.
Yes, the person in the red, third row from the back.
Hiya.
Hi.
How do you reconcile working in an industry that's built on so many things that you're fighting with I-Way? How do you do you ever feel complicit? How do you kind of balance the two? They seem in conflict to me slightly.
I mean, that was the whole point. It was because you can't change it from the inside. I was on the outside screaming from when I was a teenager. So I've taken the Trojan horse approach of getting all the way on into the inside, however I can, in order to be able to really learn all of the secrets and then expose them. For example, the way that I was able to just speak on the system of tabloid culture, that wouldn't have happened had that not, I wouldn't be able to understand that and now go on to educate my followers on Instagram about it had I not been through the mill myself. And so you can create more change from the inside, I realize. And I think I am. And so therefore, I hope that I am maintaining a good balance of being able to take what I need from this industry just to continue to further my agenda of raising awareness on what is dangerous and toxic about said industry. Like, I never let up on calling it out. I never just sort of turn a blind eye to any of the problems or fallacies that come from this industry. And I constantly maintain that it is one of the more toxic parts of our entire society, and it is responsible for so much of what is wrong with us as a generation. So I am deliberately doing it from the inside because I think this is where I'm most effective.
Amazing. Yes, the person with the green face masks, the second row from the front.
Sorry. I was just wondering if you. That sounds really loud. I was just wondering if you possibly thought there's almost like a hypocrisy within the body positivity movement, this kind of conventionally attractive fat women sort of have more spotlight than what the average, so sort of flat stomach and then normal feminine curves. And then on top of that, the fact that it sort of seems in society at the moment you're either a size 8 or you're a size 18, and kind of anything in between that is not seen. Do you think there's a bit of a hypocrisy there? Or?
Look, I don't think it's, as someone who isn't a member of the body positive movement, I don't think it's my place to necessarily call out any hypocrisy, but I will speak to the frustration that my friends who are fat liberation activists have towards it, which is the fact that it is fairly whitewashed, and it is more kind of, you see more of the Ashley Grahams rather than the Stephanie Yeboahs, and as we've seen from the way that Lizzo was literally chased off of Twitter, a fairly resilient and powerful woman chased off the internet because of how badly she was being fat shamed because she doesn't have the conventional fat body that we now have deemed vaguely acceptable. So yeah, I think it's still, I don't think the body positivity movement is where the true leaders of it want it to be. I think it has been commercialized and turned into something that is more accessible for smaller bodies, and that's why I try to always remove myself from it and say that I work within body neutrality, because body positivity is not my movement, and it is not the movement of most people who seem to get the most attention within it. But that comes to our just sort of like inherent racism and bigotry and fat phobia. So there is more room for growth there, and more transparency and more realistic representation. And you're absolutely right, there isn't a sort of representation of whatever is in between. I think the whole thing is just a mess, and once we stop airbrushing and we stop only letting lighter skinned, small-waisted, bigger women in, there will be more of a realistic conversation around it. But yeah, I definitely think there are problems, but it's not really my place to call them out.
Hey, oh, I threw my mask, it's a bit weird. Doing, it's incredible, and I just kind of wanted to touch on presentation of women's bodies in social media, mainly on Instagram. I know for many of us here, like, we are the Instagram generation, and we've grown up seeing particularly thin white women, you know, like, I remember being like 13, 14, and like thinspo on like Instagram and Tumblr was like a horrendous thing. And now I'm kind of 20, I like to tell myself that I've kind of, what I'm seeing, I know it's not real. And there's, you know, there's been, like you mentioned, there's the bill kind of hoping to go through to make airbrushing illegal. But I think it's very easy to tell ourselves that we know it's not real as women, but actually how to stop it really damaging the way you view your own body is so difficult. And I just wondered if you had like any advice on that.
I mean, first of all, our brains are incredibly complicated and it's difficult to control the way that they process information. If we are seeing something, it doesn't matter how much we try to intellectualize the truth. We cannot help the way our eyes are processing an image. And there's no way to fully override that mechanism of how our brain is working. And so that's why the idea of just saying something has been edited at the bottom of a highly edited photograph doesn't change the fact that we will then naturally, we are a comparative species, like we will compare ourselves to that image. And so, you know, for me, it was just at first refusing to airbrush any of my own photographs or allow myself to be airbrushed on a billboard or magazine cover or even in on any social media, because it's bad for my brain to try and compare myself to some ex machina level of perfection. But the other thing is just unfollowing like everyone who photoshops their photographs. I made that decision a couple of years ago. I was like, you know what? They seem like lovely women, but I cannot follow the Hadids or the Kardashians or any of these different people, because they are somehow making my fairly like sturdy and intelligent brain still question myself and feel self-conscious and compare myself. And so I followed the kind of mute, block, delete, repeat method of only following activists, writers, comedians, and artists, people who nourish me rather than make me wonder about what I don't have. And so I honestly think that's one of our only mechanisms of defense, is to control what we are seeing, to control our feed. It really will have a profound impact on you. And all of the women who I've gotten to do it have told me it's genuinely revolutionized their day. Not following brands that airbrush, not following anyone. We are the power. We have the power. We control the market. The market does not control us. We choose who gets to be successful, powerful, famous, or a giant corporation. We can take that power away just as easily as we have given it. And so don't allow someone your algorithmic privilege. Do not allow someone your clicks and your likes and your dollars or your pounds. It's very important that you start to really, like, I call it kind of self-defense of the mind. Really practice caring for yourself, because this stuff is going in. It doesn't matter how much you intellectualize it, it still harms you.
Person in the back row over there. Thank you.
Hi. My question is, one of the greatest things about The Good Place is how it presented these very deep philosophical theories in such a relatable and entertaining way. So my question is, did being in the show also affect your own views or your own ethos, I guess, on morality or on being good? And I guess, what is the best message that one can get from the show on being a good person?
I think there are a few. I mean, first of all, what I will say is I think Mike chose people who were already fairly morally aligned with the show, because he didn't want to spend 18 hours a day with a bunch of bigots. So I think that I just mostly felt like a strong it really resonated with me, the show. But I did learn to not care about what other people think about me because of watching how tortured my character was, because she lived consumed with fear of other people's opinions. And so I think that was very encouraging for me to realize that, you know what, I don't want to be like this woman. I don't want to worry about what everyone else thinks. It's exhausting and a responsibility that is further burdened on, like, you know, women are further burdened with it more so than men. So I shirked, like, I got rid of that, and and as a response, we've now seen my Twitter, so maybe that wasn't good, but I stand by most of my decisions. But what I would say about the show that I love, two things in particular: the fact that we consistently preach progress. The overriding message that Mike wants people to see is that your journey to being a good person doesn't mean you have to be this perfect saint, because it's also not possible within our world. In some way, you are always responsible for the exploitation or suffering of someone else just by existing sometimes. So all you can try to do is be better tomorrow than you were today. And I think that kind of resonates with my sort of progress, not perfection messaging. But that is the thing that by the end of the show, we were really trying to teach people. The other thing, which I hope has, you know, been able to seep into our culture, is that the whole show is fundamentally about a bunch of people from very different backgrounds, different experiences, different upbringings, who are all incredibly, incredibly different and individual. They are putting their differences aside in order to work together to get to a better place. Now, in a moment of such political division, such social division, and the ways in which we're being encouraged to turn on each other so that we will be distracted from looking at the powers that be that are actually harming us and creating these systems of oppression, if we actually came together, put our differences aside, and just organized, we could actually create a better resolution rather than this consistent, like, nitpicking, cannibalizing and infighting that is going on. Just put our differences aside and work together as human beings. And so that's the message that I think could not have been more needed, and especially over the last 4 years in which this show has coincidentally run. And I hope that people have learned something from that, because we're very wrapped up in identity politics now.
The person in the very nice hoodie at the back.
Hi. I was just wondering, as an actor of color who has broken into the acting industry and, like, fought against discrimination and just blocking to representation, do you have any advice for other actors of color who are also looking to try and get into the arts, media, acting industry, and how to just keep yourself going despite every blockage along the road?
I think dealing with the harsh reality that you're just going to have to work harder than everyone else is one of the first things. That is just the sad truth of the matter, is that it is going to be a harder journey for you. You are going to have to push for appropriate representation and to not be stereotyped or patronized. I think you have to just be prepared and not be too idealistic about how this industry works, but consistently keep pushing for change. I also think that it's very important, as I mentioned before with women, that us South Asians need to, again, stick together and make space rather than take space. So when we see an opportunity to call each other in or collaborate or work together, we mustn't any longer buy into this kind of tokenism goal that we've had, which is like, I must be the only one, I will be the token. That is not progress. Progress is many of us, a multitude of us existing together on screen without it being made into some sort of, like, without the entire plot line being about our background. So I think perseverance and you know, hard work, but also making sure that you create an alliance as much as you can. And I've definitely tried to do that with other South Asians or, like, people of color in this industry, is that the more of us there are, the more likely we will all succeed as a group.
Yes, at the front.
As a queer woman who came out recently, I was just wondering how you felt about queer representation in the media, and also about how, like, you might feel, like, forced to come out by the media at all. Yeah, I'd just love some thoughts on that.
I think queer representation is better than it's ever been, for sure. And I feel like the stories that are being told are so much more diverse and interesting and humane than ever before. I mean, shows like Pose, for example, are so fantastic. And I also feel as though LGBTQ stories LGBTQ plus stories are being told within other narratives more than ever. I definitely feel as though we just need to we just need to continue to write more of those stories and to continue to, you know, expand the diversity within those specific comedians, that it's also not just the straight white cis male gay, not straight, sorry, the gay white cis male who's also like slim and, you know, aesthetically societally acceptable. I think we still need to kind of expand the different parts of the queer community. Like, I think again, we can tokenize queer people quite a lot and think that, well, we've got one that represents the entire group. They are not a monolith, and so I definitely feel as though there should be more. And hopefully the phenomenal success of the shows that have been so inclusive and have been thoughtful, and, you know, Stephen Cannell's amazing work, for example, I'm hoping that that will encourage more of these stories to be told, but we still have a way to go. And when it comes to being forced to come out, I wasn't forced to come out. I just was kind of pushed to it by people just being so vile and vitriolic and abusive towards me. So no one put a gun to my head and said you have to come out, but I had many queer friends who were in the media saying, who already knew my sexuality, saying, I think you should tell people, because people think that you're just stealing a queer person's job. And I didn't want to. I felt like that was the wrong time, but I was advised to do so by other friends. And not to blame them, I'm an adult and in my 30s, and I take full responsibility for that. But I did it in a moment where it came across as though I was trying to divert, whereas I wasn't. I was trying to add to the conversation of why I want to be a part of Legendary. And I said in my statement that it does not qualify me as a member of Ballroom, but people seem to like discount that disclaimer that I wrote within the first couple of paragraphs and just pretend that I'm saying that my being queer, which they also doubted because I hadn't come out already, was my excuse for being in a show about ballroom, even though I'd stipulated it wasn't. So it was a tricky, messy, chaotic moment. I don't know how many people don't have a messy coming out story anyway. Mine just happened to be global and then quite traumatizing. But I'm glad it's out there now, because I've been hiding it since I was like 11. So I hope that yours was less traumatic and ridiculed than mine. But I've moved on from it now, and I understand, considering how badly it was taken out of context, why people were so angry.
Can I just ask one quick follow-up on that?
Sure.
Do you think that the story of your coming out represents just the erosion of autonomy, that you're not really, because of the prevailing tabloid culture and the patriarchal media that you have to respond to? Do you feel that you don't have control over your own story ever?
Well, it's a tricky thing, though. You know, we've entered a moment that we haven't actually kind of like created proper guidelines around, where we're saying we don't want straight people to take queer roles. And yet, how do we then know who is queer unless they are out? And some people don't always feel safe or ready to come out. So I don't really know how we're going to navigate this moment, like this moment and this truth. And I think that it's incredibly tricky, and we need to actually set some sort of like sensible guidelines around how we're actually going to continue the situation, so that what happened to me doesn't keep happening to people, which is that I'm 150% supportive of the idea that we must not have people who are not marginalized take the like 3 marginalized roles a year that exist. But at the same time, I think we need to be thoughtful and mindful of what that process is then like for the person taking that role. So, you know, it's not really, for me, I don't think I have the authority or the range to decide exactly how that should go down, but it's definitely a current issue. And I was just one example of that. And so I guess we'll just see what happens. But I think as a community, we need to come together and figure this one out.
Cool. Did you have a question? Thank you.
Hi. There's sometimes an idea that once our generation comes into power, either millennials or Gen Z, that a lot of the issues that we currently face will be resolved, especially ideas to do with like equality, whether that's gender or sexuality or whatever, or race. Mm-hmm. I just wonder what your thoughts on that are, and sort of like, do you have hope in that future possibly existing?
I do have hope in it, but I feel really bad that it's on your shoulders. I can't believe it. I really can't believe the mess you've been left behind. And so I guess that's also part of my my sense of duty as an elder millennial to try and clean up as much mess as I can during my time on Earth, just to try and be effective, so that there's just a fraction less nonsense for all of you to have to deal with. I do think growing up on the internet has made all of you the most like informed and empathetic and interesting generation we've ever had. You are exposed to information that my generation, generations before me, simply just were not exposed to, and we are all products of our environment. So I do think that, you know, we've seen the ways in which you mobilize because of social media and because of your intellect and depth of knowledge compared to other generations at the same age. I think we have seen how effective you are. I think it is so cool the way that you are obsessed as a generation en masse, you know, obviously not each and every individual, but with authenticity, and the way that you call huge brands, you know, there's a kind of call to arms for everyone to be more authentic and more responsible when it comes to mental health. Just the way that you talk about mental health as a generation is so astonishing to me. So I think that you have a vocabulary and a range that no other generation has had. So you are the most equipped, but I also therefore think that those of us who are older should be fighting for as many forms of relief for your generation as possible, considering you have the biggest fight in decades on your hands as a generation. So that means working out a mental health care system, working out how to fund the NHS, working out how to make sure that everyone has access to support and community, and that we're not chipping away at your mental health and self-esteem via the ways in which we further capitalist ventures, like making you feel like shit about the way that you look, for example, or feeling bad about your lifestyle, or thinking that you're supposed to be on a fancy like hotel balcony in Paris eating a giant slice of pizza covered in diamonds. That's not an appropriate standard to set for anyone. And so we just need to protect you better, and that's everything that I'm trying to fight for, not in a patronizing way, just as a sort of like weaker, more ignorant ally.
The person right at the back corner over there.
Hi, thank you. Just following on a bit from the last question about hope. When you look at the world, you see the astonishing levels of white supremacy and right-wing populism, but also in your work as an activist, I can only imagine with all the shit you get all the time. It's so easy, I can imagine, to just feel hopeless and very depressed maybe, but how do you feel hope? Are you optimistic in any sense, or how do you cope with all that?
Well, I am, because I'm seeing like incessant change just during my time as an activist, not just in the work that others are doing, but also in what I'm doing. Like, I managed to change a global policy. Harvard released a study that said that I, as an individual, have been, and this isn't a brag, this is me just giving you like a factual reason as to why I keep going, that I have been singularly more effective than the FDA at exposing the dangers of diet and detox products. So because in spite of all of the backlash and the nonsense and the absurd standards that I'm expected to live up to, and it can be disheartening and stressful, and being gaslit and lied about is hard and it hurts your feelings, because I checked my ego at the door at 19 and knew that this was never going to be easy and it was going to be isolating and hard, I think that made it easier. But also seeing constant change, like I got to speak in Congress for the first time 2 weeks ago around a bill that will completely shift the way that the next generation of kids starts to look at their bodies, and around the ways in which they are educated. I feel very hopeful because I'm seeing that effective change. I'm also seeing, like within Black Lives Matter, the way that my friends who are Black activists have mobilized a generation to start thinking and speaking and changing their dialogue and learning how to look inwards at their own problematic behavior. It's the same thing with the LGBTQ plus movement. You know, I think that it's so easy to lose sight of the progress we're making. Again, you know, referring back to what I said at the beginning, that we have this obsession with like perfection, and we need to we have an impatience to get there to the end, to get to the end goal immediately. Now, I understand that that's because we've been waiting for far too long, but I think therefore we don't always give ourselves the merit of seeing how far we continue to come. I mean, Monroe Bergdorf, a Black trans woman, has just been on the cover of Time magazine. So there are all these moments that we mustn't miss just because we're not perfectly all the way up yet there at equality. It's fine to be exhausted and frustrated, but I think, you know, I just try to constantly remind myself of the good, and remind myself of the positives and the progress, so that I don't lose hope.
Yes, right at that corner.
Good evening. First of all, thank you for being here. I'm quite interested in your pathway from a young girl to now. Do you think there's something about your mentality already at a young age, or awareness, or something that you've been taught at a young age that meant that you were that led you to the path that you have now, and the position and the sort of platform that you've been given? Is there something taught, or the way that you approach things in life?
I think I just suffered tremendously as a child for many different reasons when it came to mental health or eating disorders or abuse. And so I have an instilled empathy towards people who are suffering, and therefore a desire to alleviate that suffering, but also an understanding of what that feels like. And so I feel like it therefore equips me to know at least what I would have wanted, or what I would have benefited from. And so therefore I try to be a part of supporting that change. But also, I think I was never liked as a kid. Like, I've always been a weirdo. And I think that kind of turned me into someone who was never that interested in being liked, because I never presumed it would happen. And so there's such a spectacular freedom in not expecting to be approved of or welcomed in. That means that you kind of just like walk through the world a bit like Batman, except with if Batman had no upper body strength and coordination, that would be me. But I feel as though I'm so resilient because I don't look to anyone else for my own sense of self and for my own sense of identity and how I measure myself as a human being. I will listen to other people's edits and critiques, but generally I don't rely upon the approval of anyone else in order to feel as though what I am doing is good and right. I am my own standard. And I guess I'm trying to find as many ways as I can to try and teach that to other, in particular women, but all marginalized people, that we have been taught that we have to be so exceptional in order to be treated anywhere near as well as those who kind of dominate the patriarchy. And that is a fallacy. That is a lie. It's extra homework given to us that we'll never be able to catch up. And so I think that's what it is about me. I think in particular, it's been so empowering to never have wanted to be famous or be in this industry. I couldn't be less interested when I joined. Now it's turned out to be quite fun, but this isn't where my happiness lies. This is where my job is. And my job is I moonlight as an actress or a TV host, but really I'm just an activist.
Should we squeeze one more question in? I'll take it if it's not going. I'm just thinking about the people assembled here. Many of them are freshers starting out their uni lives, and you obviously left school at 16 and went on quite a different trajectory to many of the people in this room. What advice do you think you would give particularly uni-age people here at Cambridge, who obviously perhaps have a platform that you didn't have at this age, as they begin their university careers?
Don't join Twitter, I'd say. No, but more honestly, aside from that, I would say that you have immense privilege in that regardless of where you come from financially, you have access to education and community and resources that other people don't. And do not fall into, when you leave, into the rat race, get the bag culture that my generation were in order to kind of make up for the recession in 2008. Don't fall into that, because I promise you that's not where happiness lies. We're in a mental health crisis and have been long before this pandemic. The way to live a meaningful and fulfilling life is to make sure that you are helping others, you are making space for a diverse workplace, you are living within your means, you are aspiring towards happiness and mental health rather than I don't know, like a car or a specific flat in Chelsea or any of the different things that we are told are important. If ever there was a year where I feel like our value system has been questioned and has shifted, it's this year. And I hope that is the only hangover really of this year, other than our hope for tolerance, is also that we no longer think that full-on capitalism is the road to happiness or fulfillment. Money, of course, is freedom and independence, and I don't want to be disingenuous in that, but I think it's really important that you walk out of Cambridge with a firm sense of like self-preservation and what will make this world a better place rather than what will make you important. It's very lonely at the top if you try to just go that route alone without bringing as many people as possible with you. And so just mental health above anything else.
Jameela Jamil, thank you so much. It's been a fabulous, wide-ranging discussion, and I think we've all learned so much. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, and well done for doing your A-levels. Loads of love, everyone. Stay safe.